Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Patriots History of the United States. I'm Larry Swikart, co-author of the Patriots History of the United States and Michael Allen. This is lesson 125 on Crisis of the Union. We're in the Civil War, and we are looking at Abraham Lincoln's first inaugural address. This time, I am reading not from Patriots History of the United States, but from the Patriots History Reader that contains all the documents, or most of them, that we referred to in Patriots History of the United States. Now, before I dig in, let me remind you, at the Wild World of History, we have a complete U.S. and world history curriculum. The U.S. history curriculum tracks perfectly with Patriots History of the United States, teacher's guide, student guide, tests, and me teaching every chapter, every lesson in high production video. I mean, it's down to tracking paragraph by paragraph through the book. So I walk your students right through the book. It's all digital, all downloadable, and all yours. Once you get it, there's no license to renew. It's yours for as long as you need it, with as many kids as you need it. World history is 15 units. The units are a little bit longer because at times I'm covering a lot of territory. And there's 15 videos. And it comes with 2 books in the second semester that you can get both of them right here at the wildworldofhistory.com website, A Patriot's History of the Modern World, Volume 1 and Volume 2. So I like to recommend, if you're doing the courses, you do US 1 and US 2 for the first year, World 1 and then World 2 for the second year, with World 2 being the hardest of the 4 semesters. This is all based on a 3-hour-a-week instruction schedule. The videos are 45 minutes to an hour each, and they are usually subdivided into 20 or 15-minute segments. So you can either show the video on Monday and have the students read and do the workbooks on Wednesday and Friday, or you can show 20 minutes of the video till it takes a natural break and then do reading and workbooks there. It's very self-directed. Students have no problem leading themselves through the class. The only decision you have to make as an instructor is one that affects what we're going to deal with today. And that is, of all of the documents, the 65 documents that are referred to in the text, which ones do you want to use? Because in a 1-semester course, you can only do about 4 or 5 documents max if you're going to do a deep dive into them, as we will do today. So before you start the course, you have to choose, okay, we're going to do the Declaration and the Constitution. What are the other 3 documents we're going to take time out of Patriots history to dig into? All right. Also a reminder that my new book, Patriots History Globalism, is out now, and it comes with Patriots History of the United States and special offers on the website. And by the way, let me say also, if you're using Patriots History, you want to make sure you have the 15th anniversary edition, the most updated edition, because if you get our newsletter, you will be getting, or have already gotten, Patriots History of the United States 20th anniversary edition free, which is a brand new chapter from 2018 to 2023, along with numerous new insertions and new research that you put in as you're reading through Patriots history. But you kind of need the 15th anniversary edition to do it, or it won't line up with earlier editions. All right. Abraham Lincoln's first inaugural address, 1861. Lincoln began writing his inaugural address while still in Springfield, Illinois, and he repeatedly changed his draft in the 2 months before his inauguration. He toned down the address in an attempt to be as conciliatory as possible to the Democrats and the South, although he recognized that it would be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to coax the 7 states that had already seceded back into the Union without force. There were 3 other groups of states, however, that he was attempting to influence: the Upper South, North Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee, and Arkansas, which were waiting to see what he would do about the states in secession and what policies he would institute before deciding to remain in the Union or to secede. The border states of Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri, which he wished to hold in the Union at all costs. Lincoln would later say, I'd like to have God on our side, but we've got to have Kentucky. And last but not least, he needed to whip up enthusiasm in the North to support his administration and fight the Civil War that looked to be unavoidable. The atmosphere in Washington was grim and tense that March when he made the address, as rumors of assassination plots and Southern aggression circulated on every street corner. The speech had been widely held by historians to be the most important inaugural address made by an American president to that time, and it generally accomplished its purpose. The Deep South saw it as a declaration of war. The Upper South and border states heard possibilities of additional compromise, and the North considered it to be an olive branch held out to the South. However, South Carolina's firing on Fort Sumter on April 12, 1861, followed by Lincoln's April 15th call for troops, effectively ended all attempts at peaceful solution. The reader should carefully read Lincoln's position regarding enforcement of any law not yet repealed, even if the enforcer does not approve of the law. Would he agree with the 21st century federal discretion in enforcement? Given that 7 states had already seceded, did he choose the best possible approach to the 3 factions? The South, his partisans in the North, and the wavering Democrats who held a balance of power? Why did he give the South assurances concerning slavery? Given your experience with modern presidents, would any in the last 30 years have adopted this tone toward what were, in fact, states engaged in treason and rebellion? Okay, inaugural address, March 4th, 1861, Lincoln speaking. Fellow citizens of the United States, in compliance with a custom of old as government itself, I appear before you to address briefly and to take in your presence the oath prescribed by the Constitution of the United States to be taken by the President before he enters on the execution of this office. I do not consider it necessary at present for me to discuss those matters of administration about which there is no special anxiety or excitement. In other words, I'm not going to talk about a bunch of stuff that you're not concerned with. Let's get on to the real issues. Apprehension seems to exist among the people of the southern states that by the accession of a Republican administration, their property and their peace and personal security are to be endangered. There's never been any reasonable cause for such apprehension. Indeed, the most ample evidence to the contrary has all the while existed and been open to inspection. It is found in nearly all the published speeches of him who now addresses you. In other words, I've said it in all my speeches. I do but quote from one of those speeches when I declare that. Now, Lincoln's quoting himself. I have no purpose, directly or indirectly, to interfere with the institution of slavery in the states where it exists. I believe I have no lawful right to do so, and I have no inclination to do so, unquote. Those who nominated and elected me did so with full knowledge that I have made this and many similar declarations and never recanted them. And more than this, they placed in the platform for my acceptance and as a law to themselves and to me, clear and emphatic resolution, which I now read. So now he's going to read you from the Republican Party platform of 1860. Resolved that the maintenance inviolate of the rights of the states, and especially the right of each state to order and control its own domestic institutions according to its own judgment exclusively, is essential to the balance of the power on which the perfection and endurance of our political fabric depend, and we denounce a lawless invasion by armed force of any soil of any state or territory, no matter what pretext, as among the gravest of crimes. I now reiterate those sentiments, and in doing so, I only press upon the public attention the most conclusive evidence of which the case is susceptible, that the property, peace, and security of no section are to be in any wise endangered by the now incoming administration. Now, although he hasn't said so specifically, you'll notice that Lincoln is indirectly calling slaves property. He's defining slaves as property because he's referring to property, and everybody knows the only property anybody's concerned with in the South is slave property. So keep that in mind. That the property, peace, and security of no section are to be in any wise endangered by the now incoming administration. I to add that all protection which, consistent with the Constitution and the laws, can be given will be cheerfully given to all the states when lawfully demanded for whatever cause, as cheerfully to one section as to another. There is much controversy about the delivering up of fugitives from service or labor. The cause I now read is as plainly written in the Constitution as any other provisions. Quote, No person held to service or labor in one state under the laws thereof, escaping into another, shall in consequence of any law or regulation therein be discharged from service or labor, but shall be delivered up upon claim of the party to whom such service or labor may be due. In other words, we're going to enforce the Fugitive Slave Act. If you can prove that a black was a slave, we will hand him back over to you. That's what Lincoln is saying here in the inaugural. It is scarcely questioned that this provision was intended by those who made it up for the reclaiming of what we call fugitive slaves, and an intention of the lawgiver is the law. All members of Congress swear their support to the whole Constitution, to this provision as much as to any other, to the proposition then that that slaves whose cases come within the terms of this clause shall be delivered up. Their oaths are unanimous. In other words, Congress has already agreed to the fact that if you catch a runaway slave, they shall be given up. He is bending over backwards to avoid a war here, folks. He's doing everything he possibly can to stop a war and to say to those 7 states, come back in the Union, your rights are not in danger. Now, if they make the effort in good temper, could they not with equal unanimity frame and pass a law by which to keep good their unanimous oath? In other words, we could pass another law if you need one. There is some difference of opinion whether this clause should be enforced by national or by state authority, but surely that difference is not a very material one. If a slave is to be surrendered, it can be of little consequence to him or to others by which authority it is done. In other words, he's now taking the side of the slave and saying, hey, we don't care who has the authority on their side. It's not going to matter much if you're put back into slavery. And should anyone in any case be content that his oath shall go unkept on merely an unsubstantial controversy as to how it shall be kept? It's not going to happen, Lincoln said. Again, in any law upon this subject ought not all the safeguards of liberty known in civilized and humane jurisprudence be introduced, so that a free man is not in any case surrendered as a slave? And might it not be well at the same time provide by law for the enforcement of the clause in the Constitution, which guarantees that the citizens of one state shall be entitled to all the privileges and immunities of citizens in other states? In other words, he's starting to say here, we're going to enforce the law, but you have to prove the person was a slave. We're not going to allow you to just walk into free territory and say, oh, that black over there is my slave, or that black over there is my slave. See, and this is what the South is afraid of, is that they aren't just going to have free reign to go re-enslave every black person they find. I take the official oath today with no mental reservation, with no purpose to construe the Constitution or laws in any hypercritical rules, and while I do not choose to specify particular acts of Congress as proper to be enforced, I do suggest that it will be much safer for all, both in official and private stations, to conform to and abide by all those acts which stand unrepealed than to violate any of them, trusting to find impunity to having been held up to be unconstitutional. In other words, I'm not going to give you a laundry list of what laws are and aren't unconstitutional. We're going to treat all the laws as constitutional unless otherwise provided. It is 72 years since the first inauguration of a president under our national Constitution. During that period, 15 different and greatly distinguished citizens have in succession administered the executive branch of the government. They have conducted it through many perils and generally with great success, yet all of this scope of precedent, I now enter upon the same task for the brief constitutional term of 4 years under great and peculiar difficulty. A disruption of the federal union heretofore only menaced is now formidably attempted. I hold that in contemplation of universal law and of the Constitution, the union of these states is perpetual. So there he is. He holds that the union is perpetual. You can't dissolve it like a men's club, as some people wanted to use the analogy. Perpetuity is implied, if not expressed in the fundamental law of all national governments. It is safe to be expressed in the fundamental law. It is safe to be expressed in the fundamental law of national governments. It is safe to assert that no government proper ever had a provision in its organic law for its own termination. He says, this is just nuts. No country does this. Continue to execute all the express provisions of our national constitution, and the Union will endure forever, it being impossible to destroy it except by some action not provided for in the instrument itself. Again, if the United States is not a government proper, but an association of states in the nature of contract merely, can it, as a contract, be peaceably unmade by less than all the parties who made it? So he says, even if it's a contract, not a perpetual compact, doesn't everybody have to agree to the provisions of the contract? One party to a contract may violate it, break it, so to speak, but does it not require all to lawfully rescind it? Yes, it does. Descending from these general principles, we find the proposition that in the legal contemplation of the Union, a perpetual confirmed by history of the Union itself. The Union is much older than the Constitution. It was formed, in fact, by the Articles of Confederation in 1774. I think you could argue it was formed by creation of the Continental Congress in 1776 or 1775. It was further matured in the faith in all then 13 states expressly plighted and engaged that it should be perpetual by the Articles of Confederation 1778 and finally in 1787. One of the declared objects for ordaining and establishing the Constitution was, quote, to form a more perfect union. But if destruction of the Union by one or by part only of the states be lawfully possible, the Union is less than perfect before the Constitution, having lost the virtual element of perpetuity. In other words, he's saying you can't have a perfect union if a state or a group of states can just leave at any time. It follows from these views that no state upon its own mere motion can lawfully get out of the Union, that resolves and ordinances to that effect are legally void, and that acts of violence within any state or states against the authority of the United States are insurrectionary or revolutionary according to circumstances. Therefore, I do consider that in the view of the Constitution, the laws of the Union is unbroken, and to the extent of my ability, I shall care, as the Constitution itself expressly enjoins upon me, that the laws of the Union faithfully be executed in all the states. Doing this, I deem to be only a simple duty on my part, and I shall perform it so far as practical, unless my rightful masters, the American people, shall withhold the requisite means or in some authoritative manner direct the contrary. I trust this will not be regarded as menace, but more only as the declared purpose of the Union that will constitutionally defend and maintain itself. Okay. Let's do half a page more. In doing this, there needs to be no bloodshed or violence, and there should be none unless it's forced upon the national authority. The power conferred to me will be used to hold, occupy, and possess the property and places belonging to the government, to collect the duties and imposts. But beyond what may be necessary for these objects, there will be no invasion, no using of force against or among people anywhere. For hostility to the United States in any interior locality shall be so great and universal as to prevent competent resident citizens from holding federal offices, there will be no attempt to force obnoxious strangers among the people for that object. While the strict legal right may exist in the government to enforce and exercise these offices, the attempt to do so would be so irritating and so nearly impracticable withal that I deem it better to forego for the time the use of such offices. He's saying, look, folks, except for holding and occupying and possessing the actual forts and stuff, we're not going to make a move on you guys. I'm not going to try to do crazy stuff that would threaten violence. The males, unless repelled, will continue to be furnished in all parts of the Union. So far as possible, the people everywhere shall have that sense of perfect security, which is most favorable to calm thought and reflection. The course here indicated will be following unless current events and experience shall show a modification or a change in the proper. In every case, the exigency, my best discretion will be exercised according to the circumstances actually existing, and with a view and a hope of peaceful resolution of the national troubles and the restoration of fraternal sympathies and affections. So he is saying that I'm going to try to do everything in my power to keep us peaceable. There's no reason we have to go to war. We're going to send the mails unless the mails are blocked or sent back. We're not going to have to do anything with regard to that. He's going through other areas where he says that we should have calm and reflection. But of course, the South doesn't want calm and reflection. The fire eaters want a war, and they're going to get one. So we will pick up here with Lincoln's inaugural address about halfway through this when we again meet here on Wednesday. I'll see you then.